Okay, so where we left off, we were looking at the different parts of the plasma membrane. So we're going to go through a few of these parts here. So for this first one, in this picture here, you can see diffusion of small nonpolar molecules. So if you look at the plasma membrane, you can see that there are phospholipid heads and the phospholipid tails. Now, if you remember, the heads are polar, which means that they like water, they're hydrophilic, and the tails are nonpolar, which means they repel water, they're hydrophobic. So, for large or polar molecules, they can't simply transport through the membrane unassisted. But for small nonpolar molecules, like for example, oxygen gas can pass through the plasma membrane on its own without going through a membrane protein. Here in this picture, you can see a couple different types of transport proteins. So transport proteins are in the membrane, and these are called transmembrane proteins because they stretch all the way through the membrane. So this one here on the left is a channel transport protein. It just allows things to move through the membrane, kind of like a tunnel. And the reason that these molecules need to go through a channel instead of just passing through the phospholipids is because maybe they're a little bit bigger or maybe they're a little bit polar. So they can't just pass freely through this plasma membrane on its own. This one on the right is an active transport protein, and active transport requires the use of energy. So the energy we're going to use here is ATP. So by using one or more molecules of ATP, basically we can give power to this membrane protein so that it can move things. For active transport, usually you're moving things against their concentration gradient. So basically, we're moving things in a direction that they don't want to go. And to do this, you're fighting against physics, so this requires some energy. In this picture, you can see some enzymes. So we've learned about enzymes before, but remember, enzymes help to facilitate chemical reactions or speed up chemical reactions. And enzymes are actually one of the types of proteins. So in this picture here, it says that some membrane proteins are enzymes, and the enzymes may be grouped to carry out sequential reactions. So basically, they can be used back to back to do different types of reactions. So for these enzymes here, there's something that goes into it. We can call that the reactant. And you can see here that the product after this reaction is actually a reactant for the following reaction. So let's kind of walk through this a little bit. So here we have our initial or our first reactant. It binds to the active site of this enzyme, which performs some type of chemical reaction, which releases a product here. And then this product actually acts as a reactant for the following enzymatic reaction. And then that releases its own product. Here you can see, this is something we just looked at the end of our previous unit. But basically, when we talked about the cytoskeleton and the ECM, you can see that they attach to the plasma membrane through these different attachment proteins. And then here, we actually have a little glycoprotein structure that connects to the ECM as well. So the attachment proteins are like structural, and they help to keep the ECM and the cytoskeleton locked into the plasma membrane. They help to support the membrane, and they can help to cause some of the changes to the membrane's shape as well. In this picture, we have a signaling molecule and a receptor protein. So receptor proteins are like proteins that can sense something in the environment. So a lot of times your body will release certain signals that tell your cells to do something special. So when those signals reach the receptor proteins carry that message into the cell so the cell can do some specific job. A junction protein, we kind of learned about that before, but junctions just help hold cells together or interact with each other. And glycoproteins can help cells recognize each other.